Obama supporters in 2008 or 2012? How do you view him now over 10 years later? I didn't get to vote for him in 2008 because I didn't have my citizenship yet. But he was what the country needed at the time, a young optimistic guy at a time when the national mood was not good. Regardless of actual policy, that perception really matters. McCain was too old and his running mate was a moron. I voted for him in 2012, and it was not the right choice. Romney would have been a much better leader, and he probably wouldn't have made the mistakes that have led to so many problems. Also, a Romney win in 2012 would mean Trump never entered politics. I liked Obama as a human, although I didn't vote back then because I had not really formed any political opinions and didn't just want to pick the guy who looked cooler. I don't really recall much from his presidency other than Obamacare, and that I feel like he stoked some dangerous fires when it came to race relations. He's a guy that I would like to have beers with though, and other than maybe GWB, who just seemed like he was a fun dude when he wasn't in charge of a country. He's the only other Potters from my lifetime I can say that about. He fucked us by playing the long game. He refused to tear down the mechanism by which the GOP abused office, and he misplaced his trust in the people to do the right thing 100 of the time. Instead, he played it safe, so that he could never be accused of being an activist president. He secured a future for African American presidents for time everlasting. He just didn't secure a future for American democracy. I hope his faith in us was warranted. Time has not yet proven it so. He went from inspirational to utter failure. He had a supermajority and could have passed way better healthcare than the ACA. He bailed out banks basically no questions asked, who ruined a lot of people's lives. He also was a crazy war hawk that did some of the most aggressive bombing campaigns of any president. He also personally intervened to stop Bernie Sanders from being elected by getting all the other potential candidates to rally around Biden. Voted for him at 18 in Oklahoma and at 22 in Ohio. Most gifted orator since Kennedy, and his race led rabid white people to elect a groper-in-chief. Not to mention a grifter and the con artist. I miss Obama every fucking day, dude. Gets trash for wearing a tan suit one day. Probably has won thousands of rednecks and bumpkins who wish they could still Merrill Lynch him. Kahine Wiley did his portrait and it's the coolest presidential portrait ever made. I think the reason Trump won in 2016 is because Obama wasn't able to pass any major reforms in his second term because of Republican obstructionism. Unfortunately, the president gets credit and blame for everything, which means that it's in the interests of the opposition party to sabotage whatever it is that the incumbent president is trying to do. I'll always really like and respect the guy, but I have to admit that him not being the big force of change many of us or expecting did deflate my idea that things can ever actually really change much for the better. If he couldn't do it, I don't think anyone else can. I can see how he is and was always just a really decent, reasonable, and pragmatic guy. So it's hard to pin too much blame on him for the disappointments in his presidency. Obama was overrated and with minimal accomplishments. We got ACA from him. But that's about it because rather than working with Republicans, he decided to wait them out, which didn't work. This led to the political divide we have now and the rise of Trump. Honestly, he was too far to the left and never should have been elected. The population wasn't ready for the type of change he wanted to bring, but never articulated it until in office. Better than any other president in my lifetime. Though that's more a commentary on how bad every other president of the last 45 years has been. Esri changes through and proved to be a decent steward of the economy, and avoided getting impeached or starting wars that killed millions or funding terrorists by selling arms to enemy nations, etc. So, yeah, overall pretty okay. As a Canadian, I have no real say in the matter. He was the best president in my lifetime. George H. Clinton, George H.W. Obama, T. and Biden. While I did not agree with all of his policies, especially when it came to foreign affairs, he did a better job than most. He seems down to earth and a genuinely nice guy. The type of person I could easily sit down and have a drink with them and have a civil debate with. I feel much the same as I did when he was president. He had his flaws, but he was a class act as far as I'm concerned. No president is perfect. If you agree with every decision a president makes, you're not being honest with yourself, in my opinion. The 2012 election was the first election I was old enough to vote in, and I proudly voted for Obama. I can't believe how much of an about-face we've done since then. I view him the same way as I do now, a better campaigner than a leader. That you got to win the job to do the job, so that's not a bad thing. The presidency runs more on the current events than it does the will of the individual who is the president anyhow. I do remember telling everyone who cared about politics to watch Obama's DNC speech in 2004 because he was going to be president. I think he did about the best he could with the resources that were available to him and the blockades that were in his way. I think he genuinely was a good person, a solid president, and cared for the office. I wished he had been able to do more, but I doubt it was possible with Republicans. If he ran again, I would vote for him in a heartbeat. I remember Obama as an articulate, well-mannered gentleman who played by the rules even when being unfairly treated. Remember the scumbags in Congress yelling nitrogen monoxide during his addresses with ideas Obama liked. It was a real shame when the illiterate grifter, what's his name, took over and tried hard to cancel everything done by Obama. Oh, I stopped liking him after the ACA debacle. He kept compromising with Republicans and the right wing of the Democratic Party. He was a massive disappointment of a president, and he got worse. The guy basically just wanted to be a celebrity, and the fact that he uses his influence to sabotage the left is what makes me hate him. He was a transformational president who tried hard against odds to push a civic-minded policy agenda. There was a great backlash against him, some of which did not have to do with his policy agenda, but rather his race. This backlash led us to Trumpism, which is not exactly Obama's fault, but was a consequence of his presidency. Was Obama the liberal dream? No. Would I have preferred Bernie in 2012? Yeah. Would I take nothing but Obama-class presidents for the rest of my life if it meant never seeing a Trump-class president again? Hell yeah. Did I just classify presidents as if they were naval craft? Also yes. I regret nothing. The other comments have it covered pretty well. I miss his intelligence and his class. I appreciate what he did while in office, especially with the Congress he had to work with. There are some regrettable things like the drone program, but given the chance I would vote for him again in a heartbeat. Very weak on foreign policy. We're seeing the consequences of his reset with Russia in Ukraine. Huge mistake. I also question his decision to use all of his political capital on a single policy initiative. But I would still vote for him over McCain and Romney if I had to do it all over again. He was a better warhawk that allowed Wall Street to fuck us over more, while somehow being a better president than both Bush presidents. And somehow we're so much more behind now as a society is kind of fucked. I feel like Obama came in, but it really didn't matter. 40-year-old American, campaigned as a bold progressive, governed as a timid centrist. I loved candidate Obama. President Obama was ... decent, I guess. He and Biden are certainly the two best presidents of my lifetime. But that's not saying much since I was born at the tail end of the Reagan years. Weak on banks, especially with bailouts and corruption. Did the most drone strikes on terrorist civilians of any president at the time? Yes, Clinton and Bush had drones to use. No president other than Obamacare was decent. Slightly above average, but not much. I'm a moderate. Overrated. His election contributed to the racism is over attitude of his presidency that lead to far right today. Democrats lost an immense amount of local power during his presidency that they've yet to recover from. ACA is probably his most significant accomplishment. Was watching old Key and Peele sketches where they do Obama being Obama, and I almost cry. Those were good years. I'd forgotten what it was like to live with a real sense of hope, knowing that the country was led by a great man and things were getting better. Wasn't a supporter, he greatly improved healthcare without completely fixing it. He was more good than bad. Honestly, the further I get away from Bush Jr., the more favorably I view him too. I doubt the same will happen for Trump, and the jury is out on Biden. Pretty mediocre as a president, but definitely helped usher needed social change for marginalized groups like the LGBT community. The rest of his administration was pretty meta. I'll concede it was likely due to Republicans stonewalling him at many points. I miss the amount of class that he had when speaking to the media, to other leaders, and to the public. It was nice being able to watch clips of him and see how confident and articulate he was in everything he said, even if not everyone agreed with it. I voted for him the first time and was massively disappointed. I thought he might wind down the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and wind down the war on drugs. Mostly he was a status quo guy with a few hot turds like cash for clunkers and the Obamacare. I gave him money in 2007 thinking he was going to end overseas aggression and close Gitmo. Instead, he bailed out the banks and out-bombed Bush. I'm thankful that he opened my eyes to how things really work in DC and how corrupt the system is. He was fine, but not great. The ACA was a very big deal though. Biden is better, both in terms of policy and execution, and because Biden's actually interested in working with progressives while Obama was actively hostile to them. Military-industrial complex wanted a person of color. BC, they kept calling Bush a racist for killing brown people, which was kind of effective. Obama came in and people literally stopped caring overnight. Gotta respect their genius.